I had to admit, Toby had been pretty good at stealing a dog. He had thought of stuff like food and all. He had found the string leash, and best of all, he hadn't goofed up and told Mama what we had done. So I felt kind of bad about taking Willie back to Carmela's without him. I knew he'd be mad as all get out. And I knew Mr. White would be mad as all get out if I missed school again and didn't bring a note from Mama. I knew he'd have a meeting with the principal, like he'd warned me would happen. A meeting to talk about me and how much I'd been messing up. A meeting about why my mom wouldn't answer Mr. White's letters and all. I knew what was ahead of me if I did what I'd planned, but I was going to do it anyways. I made sure Toby was in his classroom, then I hurried back outside and raced over to the old house. I couldn't hardly get my feet to go fast enough as I pushed through the bushes on my way to the back. Please, Willie, be there. Please, Willie, be there. Please, Willie, be there, I said over and over inside my head. As soon as I rounded the corner of the house, I heard Willie's happy little yips. Hey there, fella, I called, hurrying over to the porch. Willie stuck his head through the torn screen and wagged his whole body. I sat on the step and let him jump through the screen door into my lap. How you doing, fella? I said, scratching the top of his head. He sniffed my backpack, making little snuffling noises. I pulled out the peanut butter sandwich I'd brought him and tore it into pieces. He gobbled them up, swallowing them whole without even chewing. Are you ready to go home? I said. Willie perked his ears up and let out a little bark. That dog sure was smart. I untied his leash and started for the path that led to the road, but as I was crossing the clearing where Mookie had camped, I noticed something that made me stop. A little green dog collar lying on top of the log that Mookie used to sit on. My heart dropped with a thud. That collar looked familiar. I picked it up and studied the tag. Yep, there it was, plain as day, Willie. I turned it over and read, Carmela Whitmore, 27 Whitmore Road, Darby, North Carolina. I felt a big blanket of shame fall over me. Mookie had found Willie's collar. He had known the truth about Willie. He had known the truth about me. I looked down at Willie. He was watching my face like he knew everything that was in my head. Mookie knew about us, Willie, I said. Willie whined and wagged his tail. I wonder why he was so nice to me, I said. Willie nudged me with his nose. I buckled the green collar around his neck and said, Come on, Willie, let's go home. By the time I got to the corner of Whitmore Road, Willie was pulling so hard, I thought that string was going to bust in two. I knew he was dying to race up the street, through the gate, up the porch steps, through the doggy door, and right into Carmela's lap. But I needed to slow down a minute. I had to make sure the coast was clear and nobody was outside. Hang on, little fella, I said. I squinted up the road, checking out the yards and driveways. Okay, Willie, I said, let's go. I hurried towards Carmela's house. By the time we got to the hedge, Willie was practically going crazy, leaping and carrying on. I tiptoed along the hedge, trying to keep Willie from yanking the string right out of my hand. I hoped Carmela wasn't home. But when I got to the gate, I could see her car in the driveway. I untied the string from Willie's collar. Then I took his whiskery face in both my hands and rubbed my nose back and forth against his, an Eskimo kiss. I lifted the latch and opened the gate. Then I let go of Willie's collar and watched him dash across the yard and up the steps and then disappear through the doggy door into the house. I turned and hurried back up the road, but the further my feet got from Carmela's house, my feet felt. By the time I got to the corner, they felt like cement bricks, slowing me down until I couldn't take another step. What is wrong with you, Georgina? I said to myself. Don't stop now. Get out of here before someone sees you. But I guess my heart was taking over my feet, making me stop, making me turn around, making me walk on back to Carmela's. I stood outside the gate. Music from a radio drifted out of the screen door. More than anything, I wanted to disappear, to leave Whitmore Road and never come back, to just pretend like I'd never laid eyes on Willie or Carmela. But I couldn't. I took a deep breath and put my hand on my heart. I could feel it beating fast and hard. Then I opened the gate and made my cement feet walk up the sidewalk to Carmela's front door. Carmela, I called through the screen door. Georgina! Carmela squealed from inside. Guess what? She came to the door carrying Willie. He was licking her face all over and wiggling his whole body. Willie's home, Carmela said. Tears were streaming down her face. She looked about as happy as a person could be. He just came running right through that doggy door and into the kitchen like he'd never been gone. She kissed Willie's nose. Can you believe that? She said. No, I said. I mean, yeah, I can believe that. Come on in. Come on in. Carmela pushed the screen door open. I'm going to give him a bath. He is a mess. I stepped inside. But first, Carmela said, I'm going to cook him some sausage. Carmela. I followed her down the hall and into the kitchen. I need to, but Carmela wasn't listening. She was humming and talking to Willie while she put little sausages in the frying pan. Carmela, I said louder than I meant to because it sounded like a yell. She looked at me kind of surprised. I need to tell you something, I said. She put a lid on the pan and turned to me. Okay, she said. I looked down at the dirty linoleum floor. Willie left little muddy paw prints in front of the stove where Carmela was standing. I stole Willie, I said to the floor. A terrible silence settled over the room. I could hear Carmela's wheezy breathing in and out, in and out. Finally, she said, What do you mean? I looked up. She was standing by the stove holding a fork. Her face was white, making her freckles stand out like sprinkles of cinnamon. Willie sat on the floor beside her, watching her, waiting for that sausage. I mean, I stole Willie, I said. I took him right out of your yard. Carmela gripped the edge of the counter for a minute and then pulled out a chair and sank into it. But why? She said. And then I did the hardest thing I'd ever done. I told Carmela everything. I started with those 3 rolls of quarters and the wadded up dollar bills in the mayonnaise jar, and I ended with Mookie leaving Willie's little green collar on that log. And then I waited for Carmela to hate me. But you know what? She reached out and took my hands in hers and didn't sound at all hateful when she said, I guess bad times can make a person do bad things, huh? I hung my head and couldn't get myself to say another word. You did a real bad thing, Georgina, Carmela said. I nodded, keeping my head down so my hair would hide my face. Tears dropped right off the end of my nose and onto the floor. The room was silent except for the sizzle of the sausage on the stove and the tick, tick, tick of the clock over the refrigerator. Carmela pushed herself off the chair and went over to the stove. She took the sausage out of the pan and cut them into pieces. Willie whined at her feet. Tick, tick, tick went the clock. I'm sorry, I said. Tick, tick, tick went the clock. Carmela dropped the sausage pieces into Willie's bowl. He gobbled them up and then kept licking the bowl, making it slide across the floor. I guess I better go, I said, but I didn't move. I stayed there with my heavy cement feet planted firmly on the cracked linoleum of Carmela's kitchen floor, waiting for her to make me feel better. Excuse me. But she didn't. So I moved my heavy feet, one in front of the other, down the hall, through the front door, and out onto the porch. I was almost to the gate when Carmela called, Georgina. She stood on the porch holding Willie. His tail wagged, thwack, 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 against her leg. Why don't you and Toby come by tomorrow? She said. Y'all could take Willie for a walk. I felt my whole self get lighter, as if that heavy blanket of shame I'd been wearing had lifted right up off me. I nodded. Okay, I said. We will. Then I hurried out of the gate and up the road. I couldn't wait to tell Toby what I'd done. I knew he wouldn't be mad when I told him how happy Willie was and how Carmela didn't hate us. I'd let him hold the leash when we walked Willie tomorrow, and he wouldn't think I was mean anymore. When I got to the corner of Whitmore Road, I stopped and looked back. Carmela was standing on the porch, holding Willie like she wasn't ever going to put him down. She waved at me. I waved back. Then, just as I was about to turn and head back toward the highway, I glanced down and noticed my footprints in the dirt along the side of the road. I smiled, thinking about Mookie and his motto, about the trail you leave behind being more important than the path ahead. Then I turned and raced off toward school to wait